And welcome to Some Patches Required, a show where we hope to educate and entertain you on the ever-turbulent games industry. As always, I am one of your hosts, Aaron.
And I'm your other host, Zach.
And this week we come back to you after a brief delay due to life circumstances with a kind of fun topic as opposed to some of the slightly more heavy ones that we've been doing recently. This time we are going to be talking about video game adaptations again, because it has been well over a year since the last time we talked about video games being adapted into movies and TV shows, and to say that the landscape has changed would be a little bit of an understatement. But before we dive too deep into that, of course, we would like to thank all of our returning listeners first. If you've stuck it out with us, that is wonderful. And if this is your first episode, thank you so much for joining. We're happy to have you here as well. If you all together would not mind joining forces and sharing the show with a friend, or as we always like to say, a mortal enemy, that would be fantastic. Also, feel free to hit the engagement button on your platform of choice. And since we're talking about video game adaptations, this one's pretty easy to have an opinion on. So if you have any of the upcoming projects that we're going to talk about that you're particularly excited for or concerned about, or any titles that you think might make for a really good adaptation or a profoundly bad one, feel free to drop those in the comments on the YouTube version of this episode if you catch us on YouTube. And yeah, we'll be happy to engage in a little conversation about that with all of y'all.
Now, Aaron, the one thing I want to say about video game adaptations as we dive in here is I feel like this has been one of those kind of like tried and true things that we've followed up with as we've continued this podcast. But it is very interesting to look back at where we started, which, if I recall, was looking at the Monster Hunter movie that had come out, which was Hot Buns. One of the Resident Evil movies, which was actually passable, as you know, like a fine movie experience. And then the Mario Bros. Movie, of course, the first one, because at the time the 3D one, the animated one, hadn't come out yet, which is beautiful in its own unique way. And of course, we've gone from that, where we were having a discussion of, is it even possible to make a good video game movie, to a world where there are actually quite a few adaptations of video games into movies or TV shows that are actually, fairly good. The first one that comes to mind is I do think they did, generally speaking, a pretty good job with the first Last of Us season. I have not seen season 2. Sentiment seems not great. But I do think it's interesting to see how all of that has progressed over the course of us recording for the last 4 years.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about, that we've been doing it for long enough to watch the entire media landscape change in terms of this one little corner of it. But yeah, if you've never seen the original Super Mario Brothers movie, please watch it. It is a trip.
I think it's watchable. Even though it is not great, I think it's watchable.
Well, it becomes, it's emergent art, right? It's not as it's confusing from a production level, kind of like The Room, where The Room, the whole joy of watching that movie comes from fun that was never intended. It's kind of the same thing with the Super Mario Brothers movies. You watch it and you're just like, this is something else. So it is absolutely worth watching. But yeah, we in the past have done, Zach, you and I also did an episode on Fallout, which I enjoyed. I've talked to some. Yeah, right? And both we did one on The Last of Us.
Yeah.
And we did The Last of Us one. I think we talked a little bit more about like video game adaptations at large, and for the Fallout one, I think we kept it more focused on like the birth of a new multimedia franchise out of Fallout. But I think that you can point to those as being critically and commercially successful video game adaptations. And then moving over into kind of the film world, you've got stuff like the Illumination Mario movie. You've got the 3 Sonic movies, which are all, very like financially successful. I remember Sonic 3 was going toe to toe with Mufasa the Lion King, a movie concept that makes me want to hurt myself.
Damn.
In some profound way. It was keeping up with a predictable box office winner. Because Mufasa's kind of low hanging fruit. I haven't seen the film. I have no idea if it's good. I have no idea, if it's better than the terrible Lion King remake. I think those are obviously kind of mixed critical reception, but I don't think, especially for the Sonic movies, the critical reception was really the point, right? Those movies were meant to be chaotic fun for, the people who grew up with Sonic as well as an entire generation of kids. So the point being, studios and production houses and the people who are funding film productions are now looking at video games as incredibly viable products to adapt to the screen. And so we're seeing a bonkers proliferation of these projects coming out in the near future. If you keep up with headlines in entertainment, especially in games, you've almost certainly seen just headline after headline after headline after headline of this project is getting a film adaptation, this project is getting a film adaptation, this project, that project, everything's getting a film adaptation. Which has actually led Zach and I to speculate that it's something of, kind of a bubble. But we'll probably talk about that a little bit more at some point during this conversation. But yeah, they're everywhere now. Including some games that secured adaptation, production and distribution before the game even came out.
I think that's wild. Yeah. With Expedition 33, the fact that it had already secured a movie deal 3 months or 2 or 3 months before the game even released. And like, I feel like you could probably see some version of Expedition 33 and immediately know it was going to be a good game. So like, I kind of get it because it gets you hooked immediately. I mean, see our last episode about Expedition 33, but that's still wild that anyone just saw it and was immediately like, yep, we're doing it. Like, regardless of sales, knowing what sales was going to look like, especially with the like shadow drop of Oblivion, which there is a world where it could have hurt Expedition 33. It was not this one. But a little wild.
Well, and quality does not translate to cultural saturation, right?
Exactly.
There is a wide berth between those two concepts, right? So if I was, a studio exec and I got a call from Sandfall and I went and I looked at what the story was, what the characters were for Expedition 33, and I saw, how, strong the emotional, beats were, how like emotive the characters are, and how immediately like I would connect to them. I would be like, yes, this is absolutely ripe for adaptation, but you don't necessarily think of, well, I mean, I can't say that now because there are a lot of games that are being adapted that I don't think have crazy levels of cultural saturation. But normally, like in the past, what you've seen in terms of people looking to video games to adapt to the screen, you're playing with the big ones, right? You're playing with the ones that everyone already knows, or you're playing with the ones that a core audience is already familiar with, because it's a safer bet. And I think the fact that a game like Expedition 33 got this deal 3 months before it even came out to see if people were going to take notice of it, or if it was just going to kind of, muddle along in a very crowded market, kind of speaks to the fact that we're looking at a strategy a lot closer to, and I don't mean to say this to cheapen the very good work that authors do necessarily, or the very good work that video game writers do. But it reminds me a little bit of the craze around young adult novel adaptations around the time that Harry Potter was the biggest thing on the planet, which led to Twilight being the biggest thing on the planet, which led to an insane studio rush of every single young adult novel that came out needed to be adapted into a film.
Well, there was
regardless of quality.
There was Hunger Games. There was, which I think the first one at least was good. And then there was, is it Diversion or
Divergent?
Divergent. There's Maze Runner. Wasn't that made into a movie? Just
those
all
were
these
made into
like,
movies.
let's see what horrible things we can do to like young children.
Teens.
Like what is the worst situation we can put them in, and then watch them survive it. It's almost like it's its own version of torture porn almost. You know, like Saw. It's like I want to watch young people suffer emotional trauma.
Exactly.
But
in terms of like the trend, it strikes me as similar in that like a book no one's ever heard of that seems adaptable is suddenly a multi-million-dollar studio project with Saoirse Ronan starring. Like, where did this come from?
Well, you brought up an interesting point. I wonder who is approaching who. I mean, one, I'm sure it's a mix depending on who you're talking about, but I wonder who is approaching who in the sense of like, is it the studios that are reaching out and they're like, hey, we got this IP. Do you want to make it into a movie? Or if it's, production houses looking for projects to take on, and then they're the ones seeing what exists, and then, basically being like, I think we could help you a lot by doing XYZ thing. And the one thing that you didn't mention in the beginning, but I think is super important we've covered this at least in the Fallout TV show episode. When these come out, and they're good. So like in the case of the Fallout TV show, in the case of there was a anime that came out on Netflix for Cyberpunk.
Edge Runners, I think.
Yeah, Edge Runners. It I almost said Net Runners, but Edge Runners. It increased the sales. And it reinvigorated like Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, and then it reinvigorated Cyberpunk in the case of Edge Runners. Like, if these do well, it helps with the sales for the video game. Yeah. So, I could imagine production houses going to these studios and saying like, hey, we want to adapt your game. Here are some of the, here are the business cases as to why you should let us do that. You'll increase sales, expand your audience, all that jazz.
Right.
So yeah, that's unclear to me. My gut feeling is that the studios are not the ones reaching out, because I feel like, at least in the case of like Expedition 33, they're so busy with development. Like, I wouldn't think they'd want to take on a movie production at the same time.
The game studios. Well, I mean, it also, there's so much variance, in the way that this has to work, right? Because there's a crazy amount of, diversity in terms of like the scale of the projects that are being adapted now, and we'll get into like a list of a bunch of them. It won't be comprehensive, but it will be it will be long. But for something in the AAA space, right, like Sony, any game that's being adapted based on a Sony first party production, so think The Last of Us, there's no way that Sony was not immediately interested in adapting The Last of Us to something, right? And Sony is, of course, a multimedia conglomerate, right? And the idea of transforming one of their key properties into a multimedia franchise is, of course, going to be appealing. And they have the production chops to basically develop it in-house, right? They don't need... Sandfall Interactive, with a core development team of 30-some-odd people, doesn't have access to the filmmaking tech that Sony does. So it's a much weirder proposition for Sandfall to make a Claire Obscure Expedition 33 movie than it is for Sony to want to make The Last of Us TV show, right? And their motives aren't necessarily the same. I mean, they would end up being the same in terms of like increasing sales and multimedia, cultural saturation, what have you. The idea of getting your IP in front of as many people as possible is almost certainly appealing, both from a creative and a financial perspective. But the way that they go about that, I'm sure, differs from studio to studio based on like the size. And as we'll get into with a little bit later, some of these projects are very small, like very, very small. Some of them are like solo developer projects that hit it big on Steam and have gotten adaptations. which, means I don't think there's a one-size-fit-all answer for, are the game studios approaching the film people or are the film people approaching the game studios? But I sense actually kind of a segue here, Zach. It's not necessarily when I'd originally intended to bring this up, but while you were initially digging for info on these adaptations and stuff, you did kind of notice a through line, one little interesting continuous vein that flows through many of these projects that does kind of speak to who may be approaching who, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at most of the adaptations being made, save The Last of Us, and I know Markiplier is doing the YouTuber Markiplier is doing a movie, Iron Lung, which is based on a video game. And as far as I know, this organization that we'll talk about is not involved in that. But yeah, if you look at anything, there is this, for what I can tell, a production house called Story Kitchen, which I had no idea existed. Aaron, I think you were in the same boat before I called you. Yeah, so this production house called Story Kitchen exists, and it looks like they are really pushing themselves as a boutique production house focusing on video game and non-traditional media adaptation. So some of the things that they're involved in, one, they've got someone that's been a producer on all of the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. Dimitri M. Johnson is that guy's name. And they've got some other people that, at least on their main website, aren't directly tied to projects. So for the sake of brevity, I'm not gonna mention them right now. But
the main two names are Dimitri Johnson and Michael Goldberg.
Actually, it looks like Michael may have been. I'm kind of just skimming this thing. He may have been involved in some of the John Wick movies. It looks like maybe. I'm kind of skimming, so.
He's also listed as executive producer on a handful of the projects, including the upcoming Split Fiction movie.
He worked on Violent Night, Mike Goldberg. Isn't that the movie with The Rock in it? That weird, awful Christmas movie that has The Rock
I think that was David Harbour.
Oh, wait, Violent Night. I'm going to look this up because this... Oh, you're right. It is David Harbour. For some reason, I thought The Rock was in this.
Although Dwayne Johnson, The Rock Johnson's production company is apparently now attached to the It Takes Two movie adaptation.
Oh, actually, I think I did see that. Well, to my original thing, involvement with all of the Sonic movies, there's a Tomb Raider animated series on Netflix that I guess came out in 2024 called Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft. We'll get into that a little bit more later in terms of how that's been received. Aaron, you mentioned It Takes Two. You didn't mention Split Fiction yet. They're involved with both of those. They're involved with the Expedition 33 movie, which was gonna apparently be a movie before the game even came out. Disco Elysium is on here. We've got Just Cause, Life is Strange, Sifu, if you remember that video game about when you die, you age. It's kind of a weird one. Slime Rancher is on here. Vampire Survivors. You mentioned a team of, I think that's just one dev, right? Vampire Survivors?
I don't believe it is now.
Well, now, yeah, it might be more, but I think it's a small team. It's a small team. Slime Rancher.
Sleeping Dogs.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a massive... I mean, we got Toys R Us. That's not a game, obviously, but it is in here. And
Toe Jam and Earl.
Toe Jam and Earl. I think, honestly,
Teddy
one
Ruxpin.
of the weirdest ones for me, for some reason, is the House of the Dead remake movie. I guess because it has remake as the
It does
picture.
have a picture of remake.
Yeah, yeah.
Life is Strange. Yeah, I mean, there's... So, anyway, the point being... This particular production house, and I did a little bit of digging to see like if I could get a gauge of what this production company's level of direct involvement with any of these products is. And it's a little bit hard to nail down. For instance, they are one of 8 separate production companies formerly known. Their Story Kitchen was formerly known as DJ2. and they were one of 8 production companies listed on the original Sonic the Hedgehog. The production company itself is not listed on either of the sequels, but Dimitri Johnson was one of 16 producers on Sonic 2 and one of 24 producers on Sonic 3. And then as we get to the more recent projects that haven't come out yet, either they haven't added more producers or their level of involvement is a little bit more granular, because Johnson and Goldberg are 2 of 5 producers on the Split Fiction. One, of course, Sydney Sweeney is the executive producer, making that 3 of the 5. And then Johnson was one of 14 producers as an executive producer on the Legend of Lara Croft show. So it doesn't seem like they're necessarily exercising an insane amount of creative control over the direction that these projects take, per se, but they do seem to be attached to a shit ton awful lot of them.
And they do get mentioned. So if you look up most of these projects in Variety,
get mentioned.
The site, yeah, they're the main ones that get mentioned. So regardless of the actual amount of creative power, their marketing is working out, I guess, because they're really becoming the only production house that's tied to a lot of these projects, at least when it comes to like how it's getting reported. Even if that's not the reality of the situation. So yeah, it's an interesting through line. I'm not really sure what it all means per se, because candidly, I just don't think they have enough of an output for us to know what everything looks like. I will say for myself, I have not seen the second Sonic the Hedgehog movie. I have seen the first one and I have seen the third one, and I enjoyed both of them. Are they critically amazing? No, but like they're fun, which is great and all I really need. And then the other thing is that the Lara Croft animated series, I looked up its Metacritic scores and it seems to be pretty mediocre. It has a user score of 3.6 and a Metascore of 65. So, I mean, it's not the worst thing ever, but it sounds like it's not something you're going to be recommending to your friends.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to like set the internet ablaze. It's like something like Arcane, which has this very devoted following. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's really a lot of takeaways that we can't draw a lot of conclusions based on Story Kitchen's involvement. It does seem like they're throwing all of their weight behind bringing as many games with theoretical potential as possible to the screen, which I don't know, maybe the scattershot approach works. I really do question the viability of some of these projects as films, if I'm honest. But I think that way about a lot of video game adaptations. I think that there needs to be a lot of careful consideration put into which elements of a game are brought into a non-interactive medium, and really paying attention to like what can be salvaged. And I don't mean that from like a bad project perspective, but I mean like when you shatter the form of the original story construct, by which I mean its pacing, its storytelling methodology, its interactivity, all of those things need to change pretty fundamentally for a lot of projects in order to be successful films and TV shows. And a lot of these games I'm desperately concerned about their prospects.
Well, I think a good director and production team can make anything a good movie, which I agree, or a passable movie. And I think Sonic's a great example of that. I mean, Sonic also had like cartoons for a while. There was kind of like a background lore to a lot of it, even though the games were kind of, well, I don't know, actually. I just think of the like original games where you're basically just like side scrolling, right?
Yeah.
And running around. I can't really speak to any of the 3D ones. So actually I'm going to shut up about Sonic. But
well, I mean, Sonic does not have a reputation for churning out good games, but it does have a reputation for churning out games that people like, and want to continue playing. Right? The fact that, I mean, there hasn't been a Sonic game that had like the critical reception of Super Mario Odyssey ever.
Well,
more what I was getting at
was trying to illustrate that like some of these games are liked because of their gameplay, but they do not have a meaningful narrative. They don't really even have a meaningful world. It's just a fun mechanical experience. So the example that I'll bring up is pretty much anything that comes from Hazelight or Hazel, the studio that made it.
I believe.
Yeah, the studio that made It Takes Two and Split Fiction. Both those games are supposed to push the boundary of co-op in the sense of merging all of these different kind of like mini games into a experience where both players are playing different characters that have their own abilities and have to collaborate in order to overcome puzzles. And that's always switching what your abilities are and the puzzles that you're trying to overcome. And so it's a appealing game because it's constantly changing and it's just super innovative and creative when it comes to how it handles that. The narrative for both of the games is very surface level and just not very good, if I'm being completely honest. Like, it is the mechanics that heavily push the game. That's why people want to play the game. That's why people get excited for the game, all of that. Turning that into a movie where the primary function of entertainment is its ability to tell a narrative. I guess there can be visual components. If you look at like Avatar, I guess that's largely what like the Avatar movies kind of rely on more than narrative. But
right, but we're not talking about like an artistic,
it's not going to be like
audiovisual
that.
bath.
Yeah, it's not going to be like that. And so my point with this is like it works very well as a game. I was very excited for these as a game because I can imagine it being fun as a game. I can't imagine it being a good movie because it's just not that interesting. Like, the world is not that interesting. Whereas if you look at a game like, I'm just going to say Elder Scrolls because I have Oblivion on the mind. Similar to Fallout, it is a world, like an entire world, an entire setting. You can make whatever kind of a story you want in that, and the world is interesting enough. And the gameplay is not why people play the game. They play the game mostly to live in the world. And I think you can make a more compelling story in that world than you can in like It Takes Two or Split Fiction, as an example.
I think I would agree in general. I think that the strength of like the Fallout show, for instance, not that it didn't have its Easter eggs and its connection to the games and everything, but Fallout was willing to do what Star Wars and Harry Potter just can't or won't, which is to say remove itself from a direct mandatory attachment to legacy characters and stories that people already know, right? It took the basis of the world and it actually expanded it. It introduced new characters in a new setting-ish and said, we're just going to tell a completely original story that anyone with an interest in this aesthetic can enjoy. And that is something, again, that Star Wars, Harry Potter, abject failures in that regard, and that is why the Fantastic Beasts movies are on borderline unwatchable, and the most recent Star Wars projects, I haven't watched any of the shows since Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan was a prime example of exactly what I'm talking about. They were just like garbage. I mean, realistically, they were just nostalgia bait, disappointment, and desperate desperate attempts to get people to like them. So yeah, no, I completely agree that games with strong like world building foundation, or even something like The Last of Us, which is so like cinematic in its own right, that the way that its story is constructed is so clearly film based that it lends itself almost one-to-one to a film adaptation of that story, or a TV adaptation of that story. Again, It Takes Two, Split Fiction, the stories are there. The concepts are a great elevator pitch, especially Split Fiction is a phenomenal elevator pitch. Every time I think about transforming the game of Split Fiction, where two authors who write different types of fiction, one is a sci-fi, one is a fantasy writer, and they get sucked into a machine that's trying to steal their ideas, and so they're constantly oscillating back and forth between a fantasy world and a sci-fi world. Mechanics are always evolving and changing and everything, and like great pitch for a game. The only thing I can picture in my head when I see that as a film is Ready Player One, a movie that was a nightmare to look at and experience. And I just can't see that being like a strong enough foundation to warrant pulling the interactivity out of it.
Well, it's also
in a weird.
I was just going to say real quick, it's also the narrative for that game, I feel like, was obviously chosen to accommodate the gameplay elements. The narrative was not made to be a good narrative for the sake of being a narrative, in my opinion. Like, I'm sure they wanted to write a good story. I don't think they were just like, we're going to write a bad story. It's not even a bad story. It's just very surface level.
Yeah, I mean, it's what are the priorities, right? Like, what is in service of what?
Exactly. Anyway, sorry.
You know what I mean? No, I agree. And in that sense, I actually think that certain games, even really small games that just have like spade level vibes, they win on vibes alone, I think are reasonably compelling for adaptation. Like, I was reading reviews for a Japanese adaptation of Exit 8, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival recently over in France. And Exit 8, if you're not familiar with it, was this tiny, I believe, solo developer game that has a couple of sequels. You can buy it for like $3.99 on Steam. And the entire thing is you're just walking through like a liminal space subway station. It's the same section of subway over and over again, but you need to notice when things are wrong. And if something is like different inside of that subway space, you turn around rather than proceeding forward. So some of the iterations of like the rather instantiations perhaps of this environment are identical to the one you started in, and some of them aren't, and you need to kind of modify your behavior in order to proceed through and get out of the subway. And that got adapted into what I've read is a very effective like psychological emotional thriller, which I think is great. I think that as like a concept doesn't necessarily need the interactivity in order to be a good jumping off point for telling a story, because Exit 8, the game, doesn't tell a story. It's just a concept with some gameplay. And it's tight and effective enough to warrant, further exploration, I think, thematically. Much more challenging, in my opinion, to kind of bring us into some of the other ones, would be something like the recently announced Elden Ring adaptation coming out of A24 with Alex Garland attached to direct. I have many thoughts.
See, I still think I have a different opinion on this one than you, because I think that Elden Ring has the capability of being a good movie, and the reason I think that is because I think it has enough world building and enough of an interesting world that you could write something in it. I think the problem is like, why would you do that? Why would you not just make a different world that was purpose built? I mean, I know the answer. It's because you want to grab the attention of the fans of Elden Ring. That is the reason you wouldn't do this. But why would you not just make a new, like, inspired by Elden Ring IP? Because all of the interesting stuff in Elden Ring happens before you play in Elden Ring. Like, by the time Elden Ring happens, it's the same thing with a lot of the FromSoft games. They all happen when the world is dying. It's like an apocalypse has already happened, and you're this like force of nature functionally that is supposed to reset everything or bring everything into a new age. But your character doesn't even talk. There's no like real emotional connection to anything. You're kind of just this observer that interacts with the world by killing things. It's just, if you were to make a literal adaptation of the game as the game stands, I don't think it would be very good unless you just want a fucking murder montage. But I can see like a before, all the events of the game kind of a thing being potentially compelling.
I agree conceptually, and I think you hit on the one word that I was going to like hammer down on in terms of like adapting any FromSoft game into a film, and it is that taking everything, presenting the events of the game, or even, in my opinion, the events of what happened before the game, like the whole lore thing that leads up to the shattering and the whatever, presenting that literally robs the story of the special FromSoft sauce, in my opinion. Those stories and those worlds feel the way they do because so little information is handed to you. You are just awash in this beautiful, terrifying landscape. It's a sad, melancholy beauty that is not explained in any sort of direct manner to you at any point. And that gives the story this sense of grandiosity, and it gives it a scope beyond what you can see, and it relegates that entire thing to the realm of feeling. And that is an extremely powerful tool, the withholding of information and the withholding of literality, and the idea of placing you isolated into this world in order to accomplish seemingly unclear goals by overcoming challenges. That lends so much to what make those games feel distinct and different from whatever other companies are doing, that to have a story about King Ublaga fighting for the final strand of Glendenning's befouled bodice in the lands between under the shadow of the... It's like, if you present that with characters just talking about it and then going to try and get the thing from the place, it will not feel like Elden Ring. It will feel like Lord of the Rings, The War for the Rohirrim. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be some like weird arcane backstory movie that feels inessential. And far too direct to capture the feeling of the games. And I do think Alex Garland has a really strong sense of tone for something like this. I think Annihilation is suitably inscrutable. If he was to use the vibe of that movie as a basis for an Elden Ring movie, I think we're off to a really good start. But I still think as a tone piece, the idea of trying to adapt Elden Ring into a compelling film as opposed to just like grandiose content is going to be really hard. It would be like trying to do Shadow of the Colossus. I just like really trying to nail the vibe of that game. Although the Shadow of the Colossus would actually be easier than Elden Ring, in my opinion.
Well, I think it'd be really funny if the Elden Ring adaptation borrowed something from like 1917, that World War I movie that was like one continuous
one take,
shot.
Yeah.
Or at least edited to look that way, because that would be like the closest thing to the official game experience. I think gamers would hate it, if I'm being completely honest. I don't know that they'd have the patience for like a kind of narrative-less kind of experience where you're just going through this guy experiencing this world and you're just witnessing it. Because to truly capture it, like you said, it would just be the character kind of like meandering through the world, defeating bosses as he's like called to this purpose that he may not even fully understand in this like desolate world. And I think doing a continuous shot would just be a really solid way of like selling that kind of feeling. But I don't think a lot of the people that like Elden Ring would necessarily like that kind of a movie, because like... I feel like that's the only way to literally interpret the game as it stands now. I think the only other way to do this kind of a film is to take it back in time and talk about the mythology and the lore and stuff. I think those are like your two options.
Yeah, but again, I still think that like a straight up and down fantasy epic about the events that lead up to the game would be tonally so different from the game that it would lose what made the game special, which is why I feel like it's kind of a losing proposition. But I completely agree with you that like you can utilize certain filmmaking techniques in order to make the game world feel like it's been translated effectively to film. And I think Alex Garland is a talented enough director to understand that. And he also has a background in video games. If you didn't know this, Zach, he's actually worked with like Team Ninja on I think he worked on DMC Devil May Cry a little bit. He actually was one of the story people for Enslaved Odyssey to the West. You know, I've read some articles saying that he has video game sensibilities in some of the movies that he's either written or been intimately involved with, like, actually the Judge Dredd movie that we did for a guest spot with another show. The Dredd movie was written by Alex Garland, and then because that production was such a mess, I think he actually took over, like, essentially co-directing it for like the latter half of the production. But anywho, I think they've got the right mind working on that, but I struggle to see how it's going to come together in a way that'll be fulfilling to general audiences and fans of the game, if that makes sense.
And if you want to do something that's Elden Ring-esque, and you want to... This is the one thing that I do wonder is, you know, Elden Ring obviously in some way was touched by, I almost said Tolkien. I meant Martin, George R. R. Martin. And I wonder if they're going to try to do some Game of Thrones-ification of it, because that is not what it is. Like, Martin touched it, but it is not a Game of Thrones world by any measure. It is not that. And so, I'll be curious. I don't know why you wouldn't just make a new IP. I think it's a great example of you can take some really strong influences from Dark Souls and make a compelling kind of not Dark Souls, Elden Ring, and make a really compelling kind of movie off that. But yeah, it is a little bit weird. What I will say on the tonal note, one small game that I actually think could end up being potentially a very interesting movie is Dredge, because Dredge, for those that haven't played it, you absolutely should. It's a wonderful game, and it's not that long. But the whole point of Dredge is you're this, you know, boat captain fishing in this archipelago where there's just a bunch of weird, like, Lovecraftian shit going on, and you'll be catching normal fish, and then suddenly you'll get this, like, mutated fish that's like a, you know, this horrific, abnormal thing. It's just very interesting. And then there's, like, some magic involved. There's this, like, eeriness. I could see someone adapting that into a pretty interesting narrative, almost like... was it The Lighthouse? Is that the movie that came out sort of recently?
Eggers.
Yeah.
Not that recently, but Robert Eggers. It was Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe with a lot of gay subtext.
Well, I mean, you can still keep the gay subtext. Dredge isn't very gay, but, you know, we can make it gay.
We can make it more gay.
It is June. So, you know.
Hell yeah.
Let's make it gay.
I'm down with this.
It's what Lovecraft would have wanted. But anyway, my point is that with that game, there are a lot of gameplay mechanics that are very good, very compelling, but I think that you could take the setting and the vibe and the idea and turn it into a movie. That being said, again, why not just make a movie? Why do you have to attach it to Dredge? Just make a new movie that has that vibe and say it was inspired by Dredge or something.
Yeah.
And again,
exactly.
I know why they are doing it, but it's stupid to me. Like,
yeah, it's aggravating. I mean, we live in an era of increasingly creatively bankrupt creatives, and you know, it's just like what will make the line go up. You know, we always come back to that, and that's what this is. It's just another example of it. It makes the line go up for everybody. It's a recognizable property that the studios, not game studios, the film studios can take advantage of, and it increases the multimedia potential of even small projects. So, like, you know, it's a win-win on their side. I would prefer to see original ideas, but they're not going to slow it down.
I will say, I think a lot of the time we talk about how bankrupt creatives are, and I'm now realizing that we maybe should reframe that, because it's not really the creatives so per se. It's just people being like, funding. What will get me exactly. It's what will get me funding, right? If I want to write like a, you know, fishing Lovecraftian story, maybe I want to have something that's inspired by Dredge, but I can't do that because it won't get funding. So now I have to be like, well, okay, like this is close enough to the vibe that I want. let's attach it to this IP that's already done well, so it already has some kind of an attachment rate, and then I'll be more likely to get approval for this. Like, it's gross and poopy, but you know, I get it. I just wish it was not the case.
I agree.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say, looking at the time, I was gonna suggest, I was gonna rapid fire get your like 1 sentence take on a handful of upcoming video game adaptations.
Sure. I mean, I think we can definitely do that, and maybe it'd be a good idea just to talk about the bubble thing, and then we can we can wrap up.
That'll work. I'm gonna keep my in treatment. I'm gonna have a call to action here in a sec. But I'm just running through a Games Radar compilation of a handful of these, and I'm going to skip over a handful of them, like Mortal Kombat 2, because they've done that before. Why not?
Don't we already
Five Nights
have
at Freddy's
2?
2? We have so many Street Fighter adaptations, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I personally don't care. I hated the first one.
I think that's hilarious because I actually think you could make a good Five Nights at Freddy's movie, but I think they're going to fuck it up. So.
Oh, they, in my opinion, you could absolutely make a good Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and they proved that they would not do so by making the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie.
Yeah.
That might be an unpopular opinion, but I hated it. Street Fighter again. Mario, Legend of Zelda movie.
Why?
Bad idea. Bad idea.
Yeah.
Easy pitch, bad idea.
Come on. Let something be sacred. I don't know.
Yeah. It just doesn't need it. It does exactly what it's meant to do as a video game. Just leave it alone. Horizon Zero Dawn. My thought, man, Sony's really pushing Horizon. They want Horizon to be the next big thing. I'm not sure it's ever going to be the next big thing. I don't think it needs to be a movie, but I think it's reasonably adaptable.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much anything on here that's Sony, I think it's possible for them to do something with it. Just get Michael Bay to, direct it, and it'll be great. Just big robots exploding and explosions. It'll be great.
We could make this a 3-hour episode if we start introducing our preferred directors to attach to it, because I could go to town on this. I think if I'm fan casting the director for Horizon, I'm not a big fan of James Cameron's writing, but he's a competent director. I actually think he might be able to tackle it just because of the scope. But in terms of the robots, I would love to see a Del Toro attached to that one.
Apparently, there's a Del Toro Frankenstein. Yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
I love Del Toro. King of practical effects,
great.
Such a good
100%.
guy.
And set design.
I think he's
Brilliant.
he comes off as just like a good, I don't know, maybe he's a piece of shit, but anyway.
He just likes what he does.
Yeah.
That's what he just likes what he does. Helldivers 2.
We talked about this. Just make another Starship Troopers. They're the exact same thing, and Starship Troopers already has enough of a following. Just make a new Starship Troopers.
Agreed. Angry Birds 3, who gives a shit? Okay, this is the one where I have a call to action. BioShock. I'll let you go first.
Oh, BioShock could be really good. I think, actually. BioShock could be really, really good. I think they need to make it unnerving in order to truly make it good. And my gut feeling is whatever they do with it, assuming it comes out, is not going to hit the appropriate amount of like unnervedness you should have. I feel like it's going to just not be as scary as it should be.
I completely agree.
I think they're going to fuck up the tone.
Yep, they're gonna fuck up the tone. I have very little hope that it's going to be a good adaptation, because I actually personally think that BioShock as a property, if given to the right team, could be
really good.
Like, it could be an Oscar movie. I'm talking. I don't want a CGI fest. I want The Brutalist. I want that. I want it to be taken so seriously as a production that it is not treated as an adaptation, but it is treated as a Godfather level manipulation of the source material. And I have got the fix. So if anybody listening, I'm begging you, if anybody listening to this knows anybody involved theoretically with the production of the BioShock movie, have them listen to this clip. And I want them to hear they should just adapt the book. There was a BioShock novel written about the building of Rapture that hits on the main themes of the game in an indirect way. You can get all of the iconic imagery, but you have a clear character focus, someone who is not immediately recognizable to audiences, and you can tell the story of this, ego-driven man building a city and the city's downfall, and it is just a nice, tight little narrative that you don't need to do a whole lot to, except, fluff out and get a really talented, artsy director on it. Please make it be known to whoever is doing this film that is the direction to go, and just treat it as seriously as you can. Because it could be amazing. It's not going to be.
It would be a good HBO TV show, actually. If they gave it the same amount of attention, as like Westworld or even like a Game of Thrones or The Last of Us, I think that they could legitimately do something with like 2 seasons. The first season being the building stuff up, and the second one being everything kind of crashing.
I agree. Set it in Rapture. But I'm being serious. I want like a 3 hour and 15 minute epic movie, and I want it to feel like The Brutalist. I don't want traditional adaptation stuff. I will speed through a couple more of these. Death Stranding,
already a movie, kind of. I don't know. I mean, I don't care. That's my biggest thing. Like, yeah, make it into a movie. It's not an IP I have a strong attachment to. Some people really like it. I am ambivalent.
Yeah, it could work. I'm kind of ambivalent, but it could work. Duke Nukem.
Sure. The game is crappy already. So, I mean, I don't know. I've never actually played one. I'm another IP I'm so like uninterested in, and ultimately don't know that. I mean, like, what? It's just going to be American Pie, but
with guns. Yeah, basically. Might as well make a Bulletstorm movie. Revive Bulletstorm. Gears of War.
I think you could do it. I would not. I don't think I would follow the games. I think I would do some other story in the world, but I think you could do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you could. I think this adaptation will probably follow Halo into the dumpster.
Probably.
But it's like, it's possible.
Well, literally just do like what's the one movie where you have to be quiet? That, like, the first one people thought was kind of good. A Quiet Place. Just do it like that, but with Emergence Day, the day where all the fucking monsters come out from the ground.
Yeah, sure.
You could do that, and it's like a survival thing. Do I think that would be like the most compelling narrative ever? No, but I think it could like sell well, and I think it would be truthful enough to the game that it would be interesting.
Yeah, so. Why not? Ghost of Tsushima, least necessary adaptation of all time.
I think they could do it, but yeah, that's based on historical events. Just do a fucking movie about the actual events.
Well, but it's a Kurosawa movie translated into a video game. We already have Kurosawa movies. It's a movie, a game that's a love letter to samurai cinema.
Which is why it's got that mode in the game.
Exactly, it has a Kurosawa mode. Yeah. Just Cause.
Whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, who cares? Portal.
that again, the gameplay of it is what makes the game. You're not going to ever be able to compellingly move that over to film. I think that you could do something with that facility. I think you could inspire something on kind of
you could make an Aperture Science movie.
Yeah, you could do that. I just like, and then you could have like a fun reference to Portal in it, but I wouldn't do it.
I would watch an Aperture Science Apple TV Plus show.
Yeah.
And then I'll close it out on this one. The Sims.
No. I don't even know like why you would. It's going to be some dumb thing about people figuring out that like they're controlled by like real people and they're like software programs or something. I don't know, like
some dumb meta bullshit.
Yeah, that's what some of these video game movies turn into, is just dumb meta bullshit. Which is,
it worked for the Lego movie. Stop it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's over. Leave it be. But yeah. I have like 50 more adaptations, but I'll cap it on that one.
Well, I think, what we're illustrating with all of this is that there are a massive amount of video game movies that are slated to come out within the next, who knows, at least 10 years. We'll just say that. And most of them are probably going to be bad. Most movies that come out are bad.
Most movies are bad.
And so, logically, the same is going to hold for video game movies. And I think that, like, the majority of people that try to make video game movies don't do a good job of adapting it. I think that is still the case. And I just think this is a bubble. Like, I think right now, kind of coming out of that superhero craze that we were in for a little bit, the next nerdy thing on the agenda to hit was video games. And people have, been successful enough with some of those, both on like the studio side and the production of the film side, that it's the new hotness for now. And there's already a big attach rate for some of these. Like The Sims, like how many people know The Sims, right? Like everybody knows The Sims, even if you don't play games.
Yeah.
So, you could essentially just make a Sims movie and then some people will go see it even if it's bad. So, yeah. We'll see. I don't think it's going to be here forever. I think people will get tired of it. I think it's just a trend.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think it's like the market is proven, right? The market is proven, so people are throwing their money into it right now. And they're taking a very scattershot approach. The one thing that I think the superhero craze had at its core that the young adult adaptation craze and this current video game adaptation craze don't have is one unifying cinematic universe, right? Like we know everyone was trying to do cinematic universes when the MCU hit it big. But when you think of the superhero craze, what you really honestly have, and I say this as a pretty brutal critic of the MCU at large, what you have is for a superhero craze, you have the MCU and a bunch of other projects trying to play catch up. And that's it, right? So the strength of the superhero bubble was that it was all kind of unified by the MCU. People were not just going to see this disconnected superhero movie and this disconnected superhero movie and this disconnected superhero movie. They were going to see continuations and extensions of a story that they cared about. And that is not something that we're going to see really take form with all of these scattershot adaptation attempts from the video game world. So my expectation is that there will be a gold rush, which we're seeing right now, that will last for, I don't know, probably the better part of a decade until enough of these projects just lose money in a pretty spectacular way that the entire endeavor peters out. And it's not to say that movie adaptations of video games are going to go away as a result of that. I think the fact that they didn't go away as a result of any of the dog shit ones that came out between 1985 and 2015 speaks pretty strongly to the fact that people will continue doing it. It will not go away. But I do think that this bubble is going to grow very quickly and then burst, reasonably quickly as well. I don't see it as being hugely sustainable, but I don't know. I'd love to be proven wrong. Maybe everyone takes this as an opportunity to really flex their creative muscles and do some interesting filmmaking. That's my hope, but not my expectation.
Well, I think my main takeaway is that hopefully when this bubble pops, we still have some people that are willing to be in the space and interact with it, because I think there are legitimately some video games that could benefit from movies. I think there's ways that movies can flesh out the world that video games just can't. I think there's certain cinematic experiences that could be very interesting in a movie. So I just hope, when the bubble pops, all the bad movies go away, and then it's people that are like really passionate about games are the ones that are making these, films, TV shows mostly. I do think that the best way to handle a lot of this, though, is to not directly adapt the games. I think similar to what we were talking about with like Star Wars, just do something else in the world. Like, some of these worlds are so big. I think part of the reason that Fallout did so well is it just didn't. I mean, it is kind of a retelling of a Fallout story, I guess, but it's not the same characters for the most part. It's just the world that you recognize. And I think that's great. I think that when you've got an entire world's worth of content, you should explore that world's worth of content and not fixate on these characters that you've already had time with. It just why? Like, I've never understood that. I just think that's so boring.
It is. It's boring, and it's the death of innovation, which becomes the death of, interest eventually. I mean, it's been proven across a bajillion examples. The more you rely on the stuff that people already know, the smaller the world begins to feel, and eventually the smaller it just becomes. Right? It has to be a story about a Death Star and a Skywalker, and at that point it's like I just don't care. I simply do not care anymore. And then you burn people out, and people stop paying you money to watch your shit. So yeah, I think, the ones that are ripe for direct adaptation, great, go for it. The Last of Us did great in season 1. Season 2 has some fairly obvious problems, but I hope that they can course correct for season 3. Fallout, I'm actively looking forward to season 2. I can't say that about many TV shows. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that the right lessons are learned from some of these theoretically earlier attempts. And, ideally, these stories that we all love become accessible to a wider audience. And we can connect with our, mothers and neighbors and bosses in a way that we never would have been able to before.
What I've always wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's the real goal. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this transforms, because I'm pretty sure that for as long as this show survives, we will every, couple of years or year or so probably dip back into this topic. But yeah, there was just a lot to get through on this one. But I had a lot of fun with that, actually. That was a good time just kind of talking about games and movies, two of my favorite things.
Games and movies. Well, I guess on that note, we should hand it off to our thank yous.
Yeah. I'm handed off to our thank yous. Hey, thank yous.
Exactly.
There. The thank yous have arrived. I've been handed them by them. And my first thank you is, of course, to Beach Girl. Beach Girl is the wonderful provider of our intro and outro music, as well as the creator and curator of a delightful online library of tunes that you can find just about anywhere digital music is housed. That would be, of course, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, Spotify, YouTube, and others. So make sure to check out Beach Girl. It's a feast for the ears, and I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy it.
And I'm here to tell you to check out Mosscat Market on both Instagram and on Etsy. Mosscat Market, of course, is who has helped us with a lot of our art, including our album cover, podcast logo, all that jazz. So make sure to check out Mosscat Market. That is at Mosscat Market on both Etsy and on Instagram. Thank you to both Beach Girl and Mosscat Market.
Yes, indeed.
And with that, we must sadly leave you all to the rest of your day. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your morning, evening, wherever you are in the day. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you. Goodbye.
Everything he said. Goodbye. Legend of Zelda movie, bad idea.